So now I was still talking mainly about individual works, even though in the end we talked a bit about a relationship between the book and what could happen when you sit there and you see the background and you have the book. Now I'd like to talk a bit more about the relationship between works. Another interest, so for me to leave the covers of a magazine or the pages of a book, is to see works come together and discover how they illuminate each other. In German, we can say, wie es zusammenhängt, yeah? Und wie es zusammenhängt. There's something like a relationship. When you hang something together, it hangs together. You know, there's this play, and it's interesting to discover that. Sometimes you can create relations that give a single work the power that they potentially contain. This is a work by Vincent, French draftsman. Very simple, handmade, error, drawing not found. It's kind of interesting in and by itself, but in Drawing After Digital, I showed it alongside this plotter drawing, which was actually made by a machine. This work by Grigory Shatonsky, which was made by a deep neural network that he fed his own drawings to and asked it to produce drawings. And it was in between this eye-tracking, eye-trace drawing by Michel Payson, who filmed how you watch a cello player play cello, sort of offered this transcript of an auditory experience by the person who listens, and of course is also distracted by the face of the player, and this purity of the aesthetic experience is troubled by the physical presence as well of the beautiful cello player, which you can sort of retrace in these traces of the eye movements. This is a crime map, which was done in a drawing session with policemen, and this is again a digital drawing. And now suddenly, when you have this little painting here, it's as if it somehow infected these others, and it's like they charged all right, but this one didn't charge. So it somehow gives this more power, and it's also play with its precision. I think if you show this at the beginning of the exhibition, it's less interesting than when it suddenly comes up after you've seen a couple of works. So it prepares a sort of surprise, which I talked about a little bit before. Another reason to do exhibitions can be to show that something exists, that maybe there's a tendency that exists, that different artists do something, and to sometimes reveal unobvious relationships and trends. And this is, I guess, what I did with Recouvrements. Recouvrement is a term in French that has two meanings. It means covering, something is covered, but it also means to get back. So it can, this is a substantive, but it can have two verbs, recouvrer et recouvrir. Sort of an etymological accident, but I found it interesting that there could be a tension between covering something up and getting something back. And I think there are many artists who work actually with this theme, with making something disappear to make something appear. This is a work by Jean-Christophe Norman, cover, Walter Benjamin, the work of art at the time of its mechanical reproducibility. I got through that. Which he basically covered in graphite entirely, as if somehow this sort of reproducible work itself, well, he made it a unique work again by covering it, as if an accident had happened to it, somehow made disappear all of its pages. So this is, and it reminds you sort of the content of this work, gives a different perspective, but by covering it up. Another work by the same artist who uses that quite a lot is this, Gerhard Richter Mao, where he covered up the pages of a magazine which in 2010 showed some of the most important works from '68. And you somehow see the Ghost of Mao through it. And actually, as I was sitting in the exhibition, I saw that with the light changes, sometimes the ghost appeared, sometimes it disappeared. So there was something quite phantomatic actually about this work. And it's of course a way to, he also did it with the Warhol cans, with the Campbell soup cans, to make us see something again by covering it up. Sort of our memory trace becomes actually the image, replaces the image, our memory trace of the work. And maybe it's a way to make us aware of a work that we've seen so much that we can't really see it anymore. So again, this play between, at least that's the way I interpreted it, between covering and uncovering. This also, I think, plays with that. Sort of covers up the promise, but somehow it's a way to make a statement about promises. This, I realized, works like a Rorschach test. Depending on the people, they either feel like, oh God, I can't look at that. Its promise is thrown away, can't breathe, it's a plastic bag, you know? And that was not the way I had conceived it, but I was happy with the interpretation. But the way I had conceived it is like something to be revealed, you know? So the promise that will still come, true, the possibility of the coming true. But apparently, you know, it had this Rorschach test aspect, and it also played with covering. And this is a work by Bertrand Planes, The Place We've Been 3. It was also in that show where he actually buys sort of not so good landscape paintings at the flea market, and then he photographs them and covers them up in a photosensitive lotion, and he reprojects the image of the photo that was on it on the photosensitive lotion. So you basically have the ghost of the image that's under it in negative appear at the same place where the image still is, but hidden by the paint. So again, a way to maybe sort of give these paintings a more interesting afterlife than they even had, because probably we wouldn't have found the initial painting very, very interesting, because it was a very standard landscape painting. But here it somehow, through covering it and recovering, he got to something. It's a work by Benjamin Hugard, which I already showed in this show, called Victoire sur le soleil. It looks like a painting first, kind of abstract painting, but when you look closely enough, when you come closer, and again here's this effect where you step closer, you see that it's actually a photograph, that there's some details that reveal that this is a wall, and the wall has been burned. This is sort of wall painting in Nizza, in a suburb that's not very socially advanced, where people are rather poor, and where during the protests they had burned a car, and the car had sort of, you still have the trace of this burning car, which kind of destroyed this utopian image, which is a sort of neo-suprematist painting. And of course, suprematists were also about changing society basically through abstract art, and this is sort of an ironic commentary on this, like, we're going to give them, you know, this nice painting to make their neighborhood nicer, and now they put a camera there, surveillance camera for more security. So there's a whole narrative actually that unfolds when you go closer and perceive it. So that was about recouvrement, and I think it's a concept that's still interesting to work with for longer. I think many artists are now covering up works. They take books, they cover them up, they cover up other people's work, they erase it with the eraser. There's a lot of tendencies that seem like iconoclastic tendencies, where people actually destroy existing work. And of course the prototype of that was Erase the Kooning drawing by Rauschenberg. So that was sort of an initial grandfather of these works. A second thing you can do is to suggest a different perspective on works by placing them in a different context. This is a work by Igor Sacharow-Ross, who's turning 17 at the end of September, and it's just a graphite plaque that's polished. You just see a little bit the movement of the polishing hand. Looks rather minimalist, and I decided to include it in this exhibition about the writing of writing. Now, where's the writing, of course? That's the question. And it was for me a way to sort of open up towards a different kind of writing, where for him these are unreadable layers of sedimentation of the history of the earth, because graphite is like pretty much when the organic material degrades totally, then that's what you get. So it's like the language, the writing of the earth that came up in a show where on the other side you had these like writings on the street, again by Jean-Christophe Norman. So somehow changing perspective on a work can be one way, can be one interesting thing by including it in an exhibition in one context. Of course, you have to do it with the accord of the artist, right? I mean, you shouldn't probably take it out of their hands and sort of put it in a context where they wouldn't feel comfortable. But that's an important issue of the critique of curation for many years.